The first time I saw her name on my client list, I thought I was seeing things. Rebecca Chen. 20 years had passed since high school, but that name still hit me like a punch to the chest. I was sitting in my office on a rainy Thursday afternoon, scrolling through new case files, when her appointment request came through. Divorce case. Initial consultation scheduled for tomorrow at 2. I stared at the screen for a full minute, wondering if it was the same Rebecca. The Rebecca who sat 2 rows ahead of me in chemistry class. The Rebecca who smiled at me once in the hallway and made me forget my locker combination. The Rebecca I never had the courage to talk to. I told myself it was probably a different person. Chen was a common last name, but something in my gut said otherwise. I'm a family law attorney now, 38 years old, running a small but decent practice in downtown Seattle. I'd been doing this for 12 years, and I thought I'd seen everything. Messy divorces, custody battles, people at their absolute worst. But nothing prepared me for the moment Rebecca walked through my office door. She looked different. Older, obviously, but in a way that made her more beautiful, not less. Her hair was shorter now, cut just above her shoulders. She wore a navy blazer and jeans, and she carried herself with a tiredness I recognized from countless other clients. The kind that comes from fighting a losing battle for too long. "Mr. Harrison?" she said, extending her hand.
"I'm Rebecca Chen."
My throat went dry. She didn't recognize me. Of course she didn't. In high school, I was the quiet kid who sat in the back, the one who barely spoke unless called on. Now I wore glasses, kept my hair shorter, and had filled out from the skinny teenager I used to be. 20 years changes people. "Please call me James," I managed, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, but her fingers were cold. "Have a seat." She sat across from my desk, and I noticed the way she folded her hands in her lap. Tight, controlled, like she was holding herself together by force. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice," she said. "I know you're probably busy." "It's fine," I said, pulling up her file on my computer. "So, you're looking to file for divorce?" She nodded. "Yes. My husband and I have been married for 15 years. We have 2 kids, 10 and 7. I made notes, trying to focus on the facts and not on the way her voice sounded exactly like I remembered. A little softer now, maybe, more careful. "What's prompting the divorce?" I asked. It was a standard question, but I hated asking it. People always looked so small when they answered. Rebecca took a breath. "He cheated. Multiple times. I found out about the first one 3 years ago. He promised it wouldn't happen again. But it did." My jaw tightened. I kept my face neutral, professional. "I'm sorry to hear that." She looked down at her hands. "The worst part is I think I knew. Deep down. I just didn't want to see it. I'd heard this before. The guilt people carried for not leaving sooner. For staying. For trying. You're seeing it now," I said gently. "That's what matters." She looked up at me, and for a second, something flickered in her eyes, like she was trying to place me. But then it was gone. "So what happens next?" she asked. I walked her through the process. Filing the petition, serving her husband, figuring out custody and asset division. She listened carefully, asking smart questions, taking notes on her phone. She was organized, prepared. But underneath it all, I could see the fear. "How long will this take?" she asked. "Depends on how cooperative your husband is," I said. "If he contests it, could be 6 months to a year. If he's willing to negotiate, maybe less." She closed her eyes for a second. "He's going to fight me on custody." "I know he will." "Why do you think that?" "Because he knows it's the one thing that'll hurt me most," she said quietly. "He doesn't even spend time with them now. But he'll use them to punish me for leaving." My chest tightened. I'd seen this too many times. Parents using kids as weapons. "We'll fight for what's best for your children," I said. "That's what the court cares about. Not punishment. Not revenge. Just what's best for them." Rebecca nodded, but she didn't look convinced. We spent another 30 minutes going over details. Her husband's name was David. They'd met in college. He worked in finance, made good money. She'd been a graphic designer but had stepped back after the kids were born. Now she did freelance work from home. Do you have access to your financial records? I asked. Some, she said. He handles most of it. I have access to our joint account, but I think he has other accounts I don't know about. I made a note. We'll need to do some digging. It's important we have a full picture of your assets. She bit her lip. He's going to be so angry when he gets the papers. Do you feel unsafe? I asked, looking at her directly. Has he ever been violent? She hesitated. Not physically, but he throws things sometimes. Punches walls. He's never hit me, but he's come close. My hands curled into fists under the desk. I forced them to relax. We can request a restraining order if you think you need one. I don't know, she said. I don't want to escalate things. Not yet. I wanted to tell her that it was already escalated. That a man who punches walls is a man who might do worse. But I also knew she had to make her own choices. I couldn't force her. Just promise me you'll call if anything changes, I said. If you feel threatened at all. She met my eyes. I promise. We wrapped up the consultation, and I explained my fees. She didn't flinch at the numbers, which told me she'd already thought this through. She was serious. As she stood to leave, she paused at the door. Can I ask you something? Of course. Have we met before? She said. You seem familiar. My heart stopped. I could have told her the truth right then. Could have said yes, we went to Lincoln High together. But something held me back. Maybe it was professionalism. Maybe it was fear that it would make things weird. Or maybe I just wasn't ready for her to know that the quiet kid from chemistry class had been watching her all those years ago. I don't think so, I said. I just have one of those faces. She smiled a little. Maybe. Then she left, and I sat there in my office, staring at the closed door. 20 years. 20 years since I'd last seen her, and she walks back into my life like this. Broken. Needing help. And she didn't even remember me. I pulled up her file again and read through the notes I'd taken. David Chen. Married 15 years. 2 kids. Serial cheater. Financial abuse. Possible emotional abuse. I thought about the Rebecca I remembered from high school. The girl who always smiled. Who was kind to everyone. Who lit up every room she walked into. And I thought about the woman who just left my office. Still kind. Still beautiful. But dimmed. Like someone had spent years trying to put out her light. I picked up my phone and called my paralegal. Sarah, I need you to do a background check on David Chen. And pull everything you can find on their finances. Bank records, credit cards, property ownership. Everything. Sure thing, Sarah said. New case. Yeah, I said. And this one's important. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. Rain streaked down the window, and the city looked gray and tired. I thought about what I'd just agreed to, representing my high school crush in her divorce. The girl I'd never had the courage to talk to. This was going to be complicated. But as I looked at her file, at the notes about what her husband had put her through, I felt something settle in my chest. Determination. Maybe even purpose. Rebecca Chen needed help. And whether she remembered me or not, I was going to make sure she got it. I opened my calendar and blocked out time for tomorrow. I had a lot of work to do. The next morning, I came into the office early. Sarah had already sent me a preliminary report on David Chen, and what I found made my blood boil. 3 different bank accounts Rebecca didn't know about. A vacation property in his name only. Credit cards with charges at expensive hotels and restaurants, always for 2 people, on nights when he'd told Rebecca he was working late. I was reading through the report when Sarah knocked on my door. Morning, she said, holding 2 cups of coffee. You're here early. Couldn't sleep, I admitted, taking the coffee. Thanks. Sarah was in her 50s, sharp as a knife, and had been with me since I opened the practice. She'd seen me handle dozens of cases, but she must have noticed something different this time because she gave me a look. What's special about this one? She asked. I hesitated. What do you mean? You were here until 9 last night. You're here at 7 this morning. And I saw the way you were looking at that file yesterday. She sat down across from me. So what is it? I sighed. There was no point hiding it from Sarah. She'd figure it out anyway. I knew her in high school, I said. We weren't friends. We never even talked, really. But I had the biggest crush on her for 2 years. Sarah's eyebrows went up. And she doesn't remember you? Nope. Are you going to tell her? I don't know, I said. It feels weird, like it might make her uncomfortable. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, just be careful. Don't let your feelings cloud your judgment. She needs a good lawyer right now, not a guy with a crush. I know, I said. That's why I'm going to be the best lawyer she's ever had. Sarah smiled. That's my boy. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into Rebecca's case. I requested financial documents from David's attorney, filed for temporary custody arrangements, and started building our argument for why Rebecca should have primary custody of the kids. Rebecca came to my office 3 more times during those weeks. Each time I learned a little more about her life, about how she'd given up her career to support David's, about how he'd slowly isolated her from her friends, about how he'd made her feel like she was lucky he stayed, even when he was the one cheating. And each time I hated Chen a little more. But I also saw something else. Rebecca was strong, stronger than she thought. She fought for her kids with everything she had. She asked the hard questions. She didn't back down. During our 3rd meeting, she brought coffee for both of us. I noticed you drink it black, she said, handing me a cup.
No sugar.
I was surprised she'd noticed. Thanks. You didn't have to do that. I know, she said, sitting down. But you've been working really hard on this. I wanted to say thank you. It's my job, I said. It's more than that, she said, looking at me carefully. I've had lawyers before, for other things. They never cared like you do. My chest tightened. Your case matters. So do a lot of cases, she said. But you stay late. Sarah told me you've been here until 10 some nights working on my files. I made a mental note to have a word with Sarah about oversharing. I want to make sure we get this right, I said. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I still feel like I know you from somewhere. It's driving me crazy. This was my chance. I could tell her. But looking at her, seeing the stress in her eyes, the weight she was carrying, I didn't want to add to it. Didn't want to make this about me. Maybe we just have similar energy, I said. Some people are like that. She smiled a little. Maybe. We got back to work, going over David's financial disclosure. He'd finally turned over some documents, but I could tell he was hiding things. The numbers didn't add up. He's lying about something, I said, pointing to a line item. This expense doesn't make sense. Rebecca leaned closer to look at the screen. She smelled like vanilla and something floral. I tried to focus on the numbers. That's his business account, she said. He always said I didn't need to worry about business expenses. Well, you do now, I said, because if he's moving assets through his business to hide them from you, that's fraud. Her eyes widened. He wouldn't. I looked at her. Rebecca, he's already lied to you about multiple affairs. He's lied about where he goes and who he's with. Why wouldn't he lie about money? She sat back, and I saw the moment it really hit her. The full scope of what her marriage had been. I was so stupid, she whispered. No, I said firmly. You trusted someone you loved. That's not stupid. That's human. She looked at me, and something in her expression made my heart race. You're really kind, you know that? Cleared my throat. I just tell the truth. Not everyone does, she said softly. We held eye contact for a second too long. Then she looked away, and the moment passed. But I felt it. That shift. That change in the air. Over the next week, Sarah dug deeper into David's finances. What she found was damning. He'd been funneling money into a separate account for years. Nearly $200,000 that should have been marital assets. I called Rebecca immediately. Can you come to the office? I asked. I found something. She arrived within an hour, looking worried. I showed her what we'd discovered. He's been hiding money, I said. A lot of it. Rebecca stared at the documents. Her hands started shaking. Are you okay? I asked. I was working from home, barely making anything, because he said we didn't need my income, she said, her voice rising. I was clipping coupons, buying the kids' clothes at thrift stores, and he had $200,000 hidden away. Yes, I said quietly. She stood up and walked to the window. Her shoulders were shaking. I realized she was crying. I grabbed the tissue box from my desk and walked over to her. Rebecca. She turned, tears streaming down her face.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. This is so unprofessional. No, it's not, I said, handing her tissues. You're allowed to be angry. You should be angry. I gave him everything, she said. 15 years. I gave up my career, my friends, my dreams, and he just took and took and took. Without thinking, I put my hand on her shoulder. He doesn't get to take anymore. We're going to make sure of that. She looked up at me, and the pain in her eyes nearly broke me. Why are you so nice to me? She whispered. Because I've cared about you since I was 17, I wanted to say. Because seeing you hurt makes me want to burn the world down. But instead I said, because you deserve kindness. And you haven't been getting it. She stepped closer. Not much. Just a little. James, My office door opened. Sarah poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but David's lawyer is online too. Says it's urgent. The moment shattered. Rebecca stepped back, wiping her eyes. I should take this, I said. She nodded. I'll wait outside. I picked up the phone. David's lawyer, a guy named Peterson, sounded irritated. My client wants to talk settlement, he said. I'm listening, I said. He's willing to agree to joint custody and a 60-40 asset split in his favor. I almost laughed. That's not a settlement. That's an insult. It's generous considering my client has been the primary earner. Your client has also been hiding marital assets, I said, and committing financial fraud. So unless he wants me to bring that to a judge, I suggest he come back with a real offer. Peterson was quiet. We'll be in touch. He hung up. I sat there for a moment, letting my anger settle. Then I went to find Rebecca. She was in the waiting area, looking at her phone. When she saw me, she stood up. What did he say? She asked. He's scared, I said. He knows we found the money. He's trying to settle before this goes to court. What should I do? I looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman who'd been knocked down but was still standing, still fighting. We make him pay for every lie, I said, every betrayal, every dollar he tried to steal. We take him to court and we win. A slow smile spread across her face. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her. Okay, she said, let's do it. The day of the custody hearing arrived faster than I wanted. I'd spent weeks preparing, but I still felt nervous. This wasn't just any case. This was Rebecca. This was her kids. We met at the courthouse at 8 in the morning. Rebecca wore a gray dress and looked terrified. You're going to be fine, I told her. Just answer the questions honestly. Don't let them bait you into getting angry. What if I mess up? She asked. You won't, I said. And even if you do, I'll be right there. She took a deep breath. Okay. We walked into the courtroom together. David was already there with Peterson. This was the first time I'd seen him in person, and I immediately disliked him. He was tall, good-looking in a generic way, and he had the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. When he saw Rebecca, his expression hardened. The hearing began. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Morrison, asked David's side to present first. Peterson called David to the stand. David painted himself as a devoted father who worked hard to provide for his family. He claimed Rebecca was unstable, that she'd been distant with the kids, that he was worried about them being in her sole care. It was all lies, and I could see Rebecca's hands clenching in her lap. When it was my turn, I stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to call Rebecca Chen to the stand. Rebecca walked up, and I could see her hands shaking as she was sworn in. But when she sat down and looked at me, something in her steadied. I started with easy questions. Her relationship with her kids, their routines, their needs. She answered clearly, confidently. She talked about helping with homework, driving to soccer practice, making dinner every night. She painted a picture of a mother who was present, involved, loving. Then I asked the hard question. Mrs. Chen, can you tell the court about your husband's involvement with your children over the past year? Rebecca looked at David. He stared back, his jaw tight. He's barely there, she said quietly. He works late most nights. On weekends, he plays golf or goes out with friends. He's missed the last 4 parent-teacher conferences. He forgot our daughter's birthday last year. Objection, Peterson said. Speculation. She's testifying about her own observations, I said. Overruled, Judge Morrison said. Continue, Rebecca went on. She described a father who provided money but not presents, who used his kids as props for social media but didn't know their teachers' names. When I finished, Peterson stood up for cross-examination. He tried to rattle her, asking about times she'd been short with the kids, times she'd needed David's help. But Rebecca didn't break. She admitted when she'd struggled but also explained the context. The nights David came home drunk. The times he'd promised to watch the kids and then bailed at the last minute. By the time she stepped down, I could see the judge's expression had shifted. Then I called my surprise witness. Rebecca's neighbor, Mrs. Park, an older woman who'd lived next door for 5 years. Mrs. Park, I said, how often do you see Rebecca with her children? Every day, she said. She's always with them, taking them to school, bringing them home, playing in the yard. And how often do you see Mr. Chen? Barely ever, she said. Maybe once a week, if that. Peterson tried to discredit her, but she was unshakable. When the hearing ended, Judge Morrison said she'd make her decision within a week. Outside the courtroom, Rebecca collapsed onto a bench. How did I do? She asked. You were perfect, I said, sitting next to her. She looked at me, and her eyes were wet. Thank you for everything. We're not done yet, I said. I know, she said, but still, thank you. We sat there for a moment, just breathing. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. It's David, she said. Don't answer it, I said, but she did. I could hear his voice, loud and angry, even from where I sat. You think you're going to win? He yelled. You think you're going to take my kids and my money? I'll destroy you, Rebecca. I'll make sure you have nothing. She hung up, her hands shaking. That's harassment, I said. We're filing for a restraining order. Today. James. No, I said firmly. This ends now. She looked at me, and something in her expression cracked. Why do you care so much? The question hung between us. I could have deflected, could have said it was my job. But sitting there, seeing her scared and alone, I couldn't lie anymore. Because I know you, I said quietly. She frowned. What? Lincoln High, I said. Class of 2005. You sat 2 rows ahead of me in chemistry. You wore a blue backpack with pins all over it. You always smiled at the lunch lady, even when everyone else was rude. Her eyes went wide. James Harrison. Oh my God. You were the quiet kid in the back. I finished. Yeah. She stared at me. Why didn't you tell me? Because you came to me for help, I said. Not to reconnect with some guy from high school you barely knew. I would have remembered you if I'd known. That's exactly why I didn't say anything, I said. I didn't want it to be weird. I just wanted to help you. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You had a crush on me, didn't you? My face went hot. That's not relevant. A small smile appeared on her lips, the first genuine one I'd seen in weeks. You did. Can we focus on the restraining order? I said, standing up. But she stood too, and she was closer than I expected. James. I looked at her. Thank you, she said softly, for helping me, for seeing me, then and now. My throat was tight. You're easy to see. She held my gaze and I felt that pull again. That same feeling from high school, only stronger now. More real. But I stepped back. We should go. We have paperwork to file. She nodded, but something had shifted, and we both knew it. A week later, Judge Morrison's decision came through. Rebecca got primary custody. David got every other weekend and one night a week. When I called to tell her, she burst into tears. "You did it," she said. "We did it. You did it," I corrected. "You fought for them, and you won." "Can I come by the office?" she asked. "I want to thank you in person." She arrived an hour later with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "It's 5 o'clock somewhere," she said, smiling. We sat in my office, drinking wine and talking about the case. About what came next. The final divorce settlement was still pending, but we had the leverage now. "David's lawyer called this morning," I said. "They want to settle. 50-50 split of all assets, including the hidden money." "Really?" she said. "Really?" I said. "He knows he'll lose if we go to trial." She leaned back in her chair, and for the first time since I'd met her again, she looked relaxed. "I can't believe it's almost over." "How do you feel?" I asked. "Free," she said. Then she looked at me. "Scared, but free." "Scared of what?" "Starting over," she said. "I've been with David since I was 22. I don't even know who I am without him." "You're Rebecca," I said. "You're strong. You're a good mom. You're talented. You deserve better than what you had." She smiled. "You always know the right thing to say." "It's not hard when it's true," I said. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why didn't you talk to me in high school?" I laughed. "Because you were Rebecca Chen, and I was nobody." "You weren't nobody," she said. "I was invisible," I said. Which was fine. I preferred it that way. "But you noticed me," she said. "Everyone noticed you," I said. "You were kind of hard to miss." She looked down at her wine glass. "I was so insecure back then. I thought I was invisible too. That surprised me." You were popular." "I had friends," she said. "But I always felt like I was performing. Like if I stopped smiling or being nice, people would realize I wasn't worth knowing." "I would have talked to you," I said. "If I'd been braver." She looked up at me. "You're brave now." "Now I'm a lawyer," I said. "It's literally my job to talk." She laughed, and the sound made my chest warm. "So what happens next?" she asked. "After the divorce is final? You start your life," I said. "Whatever you want it to be." "What if I don't know what I want?" "Then you figure it out," I said. "You have time." She finished her wine and stood up. "I should go. The kids are with my mom, but I don't want to be too late." I walked her to the door. She paused before leaving. "James," she said. "Yeah. Would you want to get coffee sometime?" she asked. "Not as my lawyer, just as, people who knew each other in high school." My heart kicked. "You sure that's a good idea? Your divorce isn't final yet." "I know," she said, "but it will be soon. And when it is, I'd like to get coffee. If you're interested." I smiled. "I'm interested." She smiled back. "Good." Then she left, and I stood there in my office, feeling like I was 17 again. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. David signed the settlement agreement without contest, probably because his lawyer told him he'd lose everything if he went to trial. Rebecca got half of all assets, including the hidden money, plus primary custody of the kids. I called her the day the papers were filed. "It's done," I said. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "I'm divorced." "You're divorced," I confirmed. "I don't know how to feel," she said. "That's normal," I said. "Give yourself time." "Will you still be my lawyer?" she asked. "If David tries anything?" "Always," I said. "But I'm hoping he's smart enough to leave you alone now." "Me too," she said. Then, quieter, "Does the coffee offer still stand?" I smiled. "Absolutely." We met the following Saturday at a small cafe near the waterfront. Rebecca was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with 2 cups of coffee. "I got you black, no sugar," she said. "You remembered," I said, sitting down. I pay attention, she said. We talked for 2 hours. About high school, about the paths our lives had taken, about everything and nothing. She told me about her dreams of getting back into graphic design. I told her about why I became a lawyer. I wanted to help people, I said. People who were going through the worst moments of their lives. You're good at it, she said. Thanks, I said. You're good at a lot of things too. Like what? Being a mom, I said. Being strong. Being kind even when you have every reason not to be. She looked down at her coffee. I wasn't always strong. I stayed too long. You left when you were ready, I said. That's what matters. She looked up at me, and her eyes were soft. You know what's funny? What? I had no idea you existed in high school, she said. And now I can't imagine my life without you in it. My throat went tight. Rebecca. I mean it, she said. You saved me. Not just legally. You reminded me that I'm worth fighting for. You did that yourself, I said. Maybe, she said. But you helped. We sat there, and the air between us felt charged. Different. Can I be honest with you? She said. Always. I'm not ready for a relationship, she said. Not yet. I need time to figure out who I am. To heal. I understand, I said, and I did. Even though part of me wanted to tell her I'd wait however long it took. But I like you, she said. A lot. And I think maybe, when I'm ready, if you're still interested. I'll be interested, I said. She smiled. You sound pretty sure about that. I've been interested for 20 years, I said. I can wait a little longer. She reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you for being patient with me. Take all the time you need, I said. We finished our coffee and walked along the waterfront. It was a clear day, the kind where you could see the mountains in the distance. We talked about small things. Her kids, my practice, the weather. When we got back to our cars, she turned to me. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. What did you see in me back then? She asked. In high school. What made you notice me? I thought about it. You were kind. Even when you didn't have to be. You saw people. Really saw them. I liked that about you. And now? She asked. Now I see someone who's been through hell and came out fighting, I said. I see someone who's brave and strong and deserves every good thing life has to offer. Her eyes filled with tears. You're going to make me cry in a parking lot. I laughed. Sorry. She wiped her eyes. Don't be. They're happy tears. She hugged me then. Just a simple hug. But standing there, holding her, I felt something settle in my chest. Not urgency. Not desperation. Just certainty. This was real. And it was worth waiting for. Over the next 6 months, Rebecca and I stayed in touch. We got coffee every few weeks. Went to lunch sometimes. She started rebuilding her design business, and I helped her with the legal paperwork. She introduced me to her kids, and they were great. Smart, funny, full of energy. David stayed away mostly. He paid his child support and showed up for his weekends. Rebecca said he seemed different. Smaller somehow. One night, 9 months after our first coffee, Rebecca called me. Are you busy? She asked. Never too busy for you, I said. Can you come over? She asked. I want to show you something. I drove to her house. It was a small place she'd rented after the divorce, but she'd made it warm, full of color and life. She opened the door with a smile. Come in. I followed her to her home office. On the wall was a new piece of art. Painting. Abstract. Full of blues and greens and gold. Did you make this? I asked. Yeah, she said. I started painting again. For the first time in years. It's beautiful, I said. I'm calling it starting over, she said. She looked at me. Because that's what I'm doing. Starting over. Building a life that's mine. I'm proud of you, I said. She stepped closer. I'm ready now. Ready for what? For this, she said. For us. If you still want it. My heart pounded. I still want it. She smiled. Good. And then she kissed me. It wasn't desperate or rushed. It was soft and sure, like coming home after a long journey. When we pulled apart, I was grinning like an idiot. I've been wanting to do that since I was 17, I said. She laughed. Was it worth the wait? Absolutely, I said. We stood there in her office, surrounded by art and possibility, and I thought about how strange life was. How the girl I'd been too scared to talk to 20 years ago was now standing in front of me, choosing me back. So what happens now? She asked. Now we figure it out together, I said. She took my hand. I liked the sound of that. 2 years later, I stood in that same house, watching Rebecca paint while her kids did homework at the kitchen table. We'd gotten married the previous summer. A small ceremony with just family and close friends. Life wasn't perfect. We still had hard days. David still caused problems sometimes. Rebecca still had moments where she doubted herself. But we had each other, and that made everything else manageable. One night, after the kids were in bed, Rebecca and I sat on the back porch with glasses of wine. You know what I was thinking about today? She said. What? High school, she said. What would have happened if you'd talked to me back then? I smiled. We probably would have been terrible together. We were both too young, too unsure of ourselves. Maybe, she said, but we're not those people anymore. No, I said. We're better. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm glad I found you again. I'm glad you walked into my office, I said. Even though I was a mess? Especially because you were a mess, I said. You were real, and you were ready to fight for yourself. That's when I knew. Knew what? That I was going to fall in love with you all over again, I said. She looked up at me, eyes shining. You're such a sap. You love it, I said. I do, she said. I really do. We sat there in the quiet and I thought about second chances. About how sometimes life gives you exactly what you need, exactly when you're ready for it. I'd waited 20 years to be with Rebecca Chen. And sitting there, with her hand in mine and the future stretching out ahead of us, I knew it was worth every single day. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to Miami Stories for more real-life relationship stories that'll keep you hooked. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss when we drop a new story. We share stories about second chances, unexpected reunions, and love that finds its way back. Your support means everything to us, and we'll see you in the next one.